All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our education subcommittee as an extension of the African American Task Force. At this time, we're just going to go ahead and jump right in as we are 12 minutes behind. For those of you who are watching or are in public comments, thank you for joining us as well. Today is Thursday, December 16th. This is our second meeting for this month. So we're going to go ahead and start with attendance. Caitlin, can you take roll, please?
Yes. Representative Moore.
Here.
Representative Wilson Anton. Christine Aloyas. I always feel like I'm messing that up.
Correctly. Good evening.
Okay.
Present.
All right, thank you. Tiffany Savage. Kyrie Bay. Simone Philpotts. Gloria Ho.
Present.
Amanda Holman.
Present.
Leslie Footman. Jamie Bailey.
Present.
Dr. Dania Woods.
Present.
Stephanie Ingram. Krista Davis. Eric Anderson. Jermaine Solomon.
Present.
Dr. Pepakai. Dr. Rouser.
Present.
Jenny Furcucci. Monique Martin.
Present.
Dr. Tasia McCove.
Present.
Dr. Michael Harp. And Charito Calvachi Mateco.
Presente. Present.
Gracias. We have 11 members present, and that is not enough for a quorum. We need
Okay,
12.
We'll just move on and just let me know when another member joins. That way I know at the end, we'll review the minutes and we will take a vote on the minutes. Did everyone receive the minutes and the agenda for tonight? Yes. Okay. So for those who, everyone received their agenda for tonight. So I just wanted to note that there is change on the agenda for this evening. The school to prison pipeline work group was supposed to present today, but due to them feeling as though they just needed a little more time, an extension was granted. So tonight we're just going to work through on the recommendations from the last meeting from December 2nd. So today, I know on the last meeting, there was a lot of you all on the subcommittee expressed concern of what the recommendation actually is going to look like. And so today we are going to work on the actual wording. As of today, earlier today, all of the subcommittee chairs for the African American Task Force met, and by June 30th, we will have a full recommendation report that will be due, meaning that all of our recommendations from all of the work groups needs to be wrapped up at least by May. I know that the original plan was to have everything solidified from this subcommittee by January, but as we know, sometimes the process takes a little longer than initial plan, and that's okay. So I do appreciate everyone's time. It was originally meant for us to meet twice this month, but I want to just thank you all again for all your time and your commitment that you have dedicated towards making sure that we work on these issues as stakeholders, because we all know how necessary and important the work here that we are doing on these topics. So Caitlin, did you want to run through how you would like us to do this operationally?
Sure. So hopefully you all can see I'm sharing my screen. So this is just a Word document with the 3 different sets of recommendations from the SEL poverty group that we heard last time. And so what I would like to do is make live edits to this language. So this is kind of where we're starting from. And if people feel like we need to make a change, for example, to the one that I've highlighted, make social emotional learning a priority in schools, districts, and states, just, raise your hand and Rep Moore will call on you, and you can provide, your suggested rewording, whether it's, deleting words, adding words, whatever the case may be. And then, once you all feel like you're in a place where you're happy with the recommendation, then we can go ahead and vote to approve it. Obviously, we'll need to reach quorum to vote, but at least, even if we don't get a quorum, we can finalize that wording. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, I'm assuming silence means yes.
Yes. So is there, I guess, I don't know how many of the members are actually familiar with what recommendations should look like. Do you have, Caitlin, sorry to put you on the spot, but do you have like a sample of a recommendation from any previous subcommittees task force, just so everyone can understand what it could look like or what the definitions can say for each recommendation?
Yes, real quickly, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and I'm going to bring another one up.
So I'm asking that just so it could be helpful for all of us as we do this work tonight. So everyone, I believe in the we do, I do, we do, you do model for instructional teaching, just so we can understand where our goal is for tonight and where we can get to. So Caitlin, go ahead.
Okay, so right now what you're seeing are a couple of the recommendations from the Infrastructure and Environment Subcommittee. And so I'll read the first one out. It says, the Delaware State Housing Authority should conduct a study on ways that the General Assembly can address the supply of and access to affordable housing in all of its forms. This recommendation was passed at the subcommittee level back in June and was passed by the full African American Task Force just last month. And so it is charging a very specific entity, which is the Delaware State Housing Authority, with carrying out a very specific action, which is a study on ways that the General Assembly can address affordable housing. So the idea there was DSHA does the study and then they make recommendations specifically for ways that the GA can advance legislation. Another example, we'll go to the next one down. The General Assembly should pass legislation creating a tenant's right to counsel, establishing a minimum amount of arrears that must accrue before an eviction can be filed, and creating a pre-filing diversion program, as well as other measures to reduce evictions. The General Assembly should pass Senate Bill 101 as introduced, which addresses many of these issues. So you can see this example is a little bit different because now, instead of asking a state agency to do something, we're directly saying the General Assembly should pass a bill on this specific topic. And oh, by the way, there's already a bill that does that. You need to pass that specific bill. I don't know if you want me to run through any more, or if that gives people a good enough idea of what the possibilities are.
I would just say, can I get a thumbs up so I can read the screens? If you now have a better understanding of the verbiage for the recommendation. All right, I got Sharito. If y'all could just do if you're not driving, do okay, I see thumbs up. All right, okay. Majority thumbs up. Okay. Dr. Rouser, you good? I didn't see you okay. All right. So I think everyone now has a good understanding of the verbiage that we can consider of doing for each recommendation. So
Okay, so now you should be seeing our recommendations again.
So I would start with the actual work group members. So when you recommended for schools to address social emotional learning, what exactly did you look at that as a recommendation? For example, for DOE to recommend for school districts and charters to design curriculums? Is this looking to be so that would be like a regulation? Are you looking for this to be an actual passed bill that this is now a requirement for all school districts and charters to follow some type of social emotional program and have all these elements met?
Representative Moore, this is Gloria Ho. So I think my thinking was, and I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I just jotted some notes that Delaware legislators should provide publicly funded schools and preschools with funds necessary to develop school-wide action plans addressing the needs of traumatized children and to decrease punitive responses. And the policies and guidance can include ways to connect SEL to other behavioral and academic supports. Or the development of social emotional learning standards. That was the other part of it too, was integrating SEL into other district efforts. And that Delaware, again, should provide publicly funded schools and preschools just to develop.
Do you have that typed up already?
I'm sorry?
Do you have that language actually typed up?
Oh, I do, yes.
Okay, can you email it to Caitlin real quick so she
Yeah,
can
of course.
copy and paste it and put it on the screen so everyone can see the language? Because that sounds like a two-parter. There is an action step for the General Assembly to fund, and then it also sounds like a regulation for DOE to adopt for all charter schools and public schools.
Okay,
We say district and non-district schools.
okay, so email it to Caitlin. Okay.
Yeah. And what she's going to do is, so I will ask that because we don't have a chat function in the Zoom, if you have actual language, email it to Caitlin and Caitlin will get it and then she can copy and paste it so we all can see the language on the screen. Go ahead, Sharito. I see your hand.
Thank you. I apologize that I'm driving, but I had to do a circle in people's place and I'm coming back. So I thank you. Something that I can't type, but I would like, if it is, agreeable and understandable, a language that will say attending the wholeness of the student, the wholeness. Or any other word that you feel convenient, but the whole student. Because even though I like so much that the social and emotional component now is more understandable than before, understanding the person as a whole is more comprehensive, includes the mental health, includes the physical state of the person, and even not being religious, but the spiritual. Spiritual is everything that is invisible. And I think attending the wholeness of the student, or words for that, to that effect, I think those are comprehensive completely. It really conveys everything that we are as people.
Okay, so from my understanding, and anyone can chime in to correct me if I'm wrong, SEL, to Sharito's point, to make sure that we're on the right track, and we want to make sure that the language is very clear as we go on. Social emotional targets the human development entirety. So it's just not like just one component of just emotional support, but it actually talks about to the things that Sharito is mentioning. So I'll yield that clarification to the work group as you all did the extensive research on it. Or anyone for that matter who has a more depth analysis in SEL.
Representative Moore, this is Christine. So I just sent an email to Caitlin with the link to the Department of Ed's SEL site with all of the work that's been done behind that. On that site, it has our social emotional behavioral wellness plan. It also, which is a whole child plan along with MTSS. We're trying to integrate the social emotional and the academics together. It's so important. I believe also on that page, but I just want to make sure I'm paying full attention to the meeting, but I can search through and find are also the standards document that was created by multiple stakeholders, a grassroots effort across the state over about 3 years that has general standards for SEL, but then also they worked diligently to create standards linked to specific content areas that link the social emotional learning in with the actual content areas. So I'll search for that afterwards so that I'm paying attention as everyone's speaking, but I can send that as well to help in this journey forward.
Thank you. So you would know more about this area in which we are moving forward with this recommendation in this language. So currently, I know you just mentioned a few that there's already SEL standards. So does this definition address something that's already being done? In how can we make this more, I'm looking for the word, more clear cut and very concise?
So I'm going to defer just for a second because I see that Amanda has her hand up. So I don't know if she has more to add to that, but I can follow up though on that as well. I just didn't,
Okay.
I didn't want to interrupt. I wasn't sure if there was something that Amanda had as well.
I didn't have I guess input specifically to that. I just kind of had a question. So our goal right now is to say like specifically what everybody should do. Like, I guess I'm confused. Like I know the standards exist, but like what do we currently have in place that's like a mandate across schools? Because I'm assuming our goal is for there to be something that's mandatory, not really up for, I guess, interpretation. It's kind of like, this is what everybody has to do, versus like, hey guys, these are things you should be considering, but not having anything like solid in place that's not up for debate. So I guess where are we as a state with that? Because I haven't, like when I was looking at stuff, I just didn't see anything that said like, you have to be doing X, Y, Z. I saw like suggestions and like, these are things you should think about, but not anything that's like, this is the programming, this is the curriculum, this is how you need to address it, or anything specific.
So most of the answer to that question is from, and again, Christine, I lean on you for any clarifications in this statement. DOE only can make recommendations for district and non-district schools to follow. It is up to, because we're a local control state, it is up to them to implement their suggestions. They can't force any district, I guess to a certain extent, to follow these suggestions that they give out. However, if it's written in code, then that means it's law and they have to follow those things. Did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, Representative, yes, mostly around the curriculum piece. So, standards are one piece, and then the curriculum is absolutely LEA dependent. I know though, and I was just looking around the screen again to see too, I know that Kyrie was an integral part in working through this as well with Terry Lawler. And I saw in the minutes because I apologize for not being able to attend our last meeting. Terry Lawler's name was brought up. This has been a major endeavor across the state, and they've done a beautiful job at putting this together. So I'd be hesitant for me to make a recommendation as to like what the next steps would be in moving forward with them, because they have invested so much time and so many stakeholders and nationally with partners as well in order to get where they are right now. So, you know, that's something that I think Terry Lawler would be a perfect person to reach out to and say, like, where are we? What are next steps? What would be helpful in that? But what you said, Representative, before is true. You know, curriculum is dependent on the LEAs to make those decisions.
Okay. But from my understanding from a further conversation, as long as it's a DOE approved curriculum, correct?
So the standards the standards come from the state, the curriculum addresses the standards. So as long as the curriculum addresses the standards, then the LEA can adopt them as, you know, meeting those standards.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. All right, Monique.
Hi, I wanted to address the point regarding policy and whether or not it is mandatory based on law. Terry and I actually participate on a work group that is internal right now because we would like to refine a policy that has been in place in Delaware since 1999 that does require some of the things that we're speaking of. It's Diversity 220, and it has 8 indicators, and schools are responsible for many of the things that we're speaking about. And they have to have plans. The district has to have a plan. The schools have to have a plan. And so I don't want to reinvent the wheel. That particular regulation was enacted in 1999. It was amended in 2004, and it was amended again in 2009. And so the internal work group brought it up for the Office of Equity and Innovation to sort of lead the charge with amending that particular policy again and coming up with a monitoring schedule so that we could provide technical assistance and supports to the LEAs and schools regarding all of the 8 indicators, which are inclusive of some of what we're discussing this evening, and certainly every aspect of the work that the other work group committees are focused on. The issue is refining the language to include some of the things that have been reflected in the discussion tonight. I'm not able to send it via chat, but I will email it to Caitlin, and then, you know, people can take a look. But that was the leverage that we were using with the internal work group to ensure that it was a non-negotiable for schools, districts, and when I say schools, I'm including charters. And the language in Delaware, when I say LEAs, that's also inclusive of charters. So I just want to share that information so that we don't have to start from scratch. Thank you.
Thank you, Monique. Go ahead, Amanda.
So since it sounds like some of the stuff is already in the works, do we need to create recommendations around them, or should we more so like gear our recommendations towards like how can that, I guess, initiative be supported?
So the recommendations is just like action steps that could be adopted. So if there's already, say if there were already legislation in like on the docket that has not been presented that actually provides funding for SEL curriculums, that means that I'm not going to go and get it drafted because one is already drafted. That just means that that initiative just have become a priority. It still could be a recommendation for the state, for us to bring forth. If it's already being worked on, that's even greater because now we just made it that much of an education priority as it relates to the impact of that issue on African American and Black and Brown students. If that makes sense. All right, Gloria.
Hi, I'm trying to also understand also, and thank you for Dr. Alois for speaking up, and Monique Martin also, thank you. I don't want to reinvent the wheel also, because it sounds like these things are already being done at DOE. And like, I guess for me is what is it for us guys on this committee and on the ground level that are doing this work can support you guys? What, Monique, what are your recommendations? Is it funding? My thinking is maybe, is it like, do we need more data? Like we talk about best practices and what needs to be happening, and that how data informs what we do and the decisions being made. Is it that we need to provide more funding so that we can look at data to assess progress for SEL programs? I'm just trying to figure out what, I mean, we're asking for recommendations. You guys, I mean, I wish I'd known all of this last week when we presented on SEL, but how I'm just trying to figure out how I can help as a school social worker.
And same as a legislator. So I guess, you know, some people are privy to information that is happening obviously outside of the subcommittee. All of us are connected to some other type of group, individuals that are doing the work that we're very much discussing. I know that some people are working in tandems and in silos. So to what Gloria said, for those who are privy to other work groups working on these issues currently outside of our subcommittee, how can our recommendations, so we're not reinventing the wheel, how can we make sure that what the recommendations that we bring forth, and I know that everyone stressed how important and essential the language of these recommendations are to this work. How can we all put that into action? Because we are having a full task force meeting in January, and I need to present some type of recommendations from this subcommittee in next month's meeting. And that even means, I believe that there was 4 recommendations. Is it 4? How many total recommendations came out from this? Even if we roped everything into one big recommendation that is very specific and concise, that does not reinvent the wheel, we have the power and the autonomy to do that. I just want everybody to understand what the scope is, okay? We don't have to have 18 recommendations for each topic. It's up to us to decide, okay, this looks good based upon what I know about this issue, based upon what I see day to day, based upon what I know that is currently being worked on. This recommendation will help. I know other people were working on, so now this recommendation is put as a priority. It doesn't necessarily have to be regulation. It doesn't have to be legislation. It could be, as Caitlin you saw in the model, it could be just doing a resolution calling attention to this priority. it can actually be legislation calling for the funding of this topic. It could just be saying that there needs to be a tighter regulation, making sure that every school in the state of Delaware is working on this, and that curriculum, whatever curriculum is according to these standards. And this is what the updated standards need to be according to social emotional learning. Does that kind of make sense of kind of like a guide to where we need to go tonight? Yes, no. Okay. So I guess I would work with what we have on the screen. Does anybody know how funding for SEL is in preschools? I don't think there's funding for preschool social emotional learning, but I don't know all. So if someone else is privy to that information, this is why we're all here, because I can't do this work by myself. So, and I don't know everything. I'm definitely, it's a lot out there. I went from being a legislative aide thinking I know to becoming an actual elected official, and I realized I don't know. And there's just so much after my first year that I'm still learning and trying to know. So if this is now the time to speak up, raise hands, and join in the conversation. This is a dialogue. This is a team and joint effort. Monique, do you still have your hand up? Yes. Okay, go ahead. And then
Yes.
Amanda.
Okay, I wanted to respectfully respond to Gloria because she asked the question and I heard her. I wanted to make sure that I had an opportunity to address the question. And I think the question was, what can we do? And I think that's an excellent question because I ask that question every day. Like, what can I do to support with the fidelity of the implementation and the tools and resources? And one thing that I realized is that some policies are in place. And of course, you know, some are not, and which is part of the reason that we're here. For the ones that are in place, the question is, what are the root causes? This is a question that I asked myself. What are the root causes that contribute to the barriers to implementing those policies with fidelity? Because the policies, for instance, 220 that I just sent to Caitlin and Representative Ray, the policies actually have good intentions and should have involved, you know, dimensions of diversity of stakeholders to share what the potential impact would be based on the policy, and making certain that blind spots are covered and the intention will not marginalize or disenfranchise or, you know, do anything harmful to anyone involved in the implementation of the policy. What I'm learning is that some of us, meaning everyone here, everyone in the schools, and this is a blanket statement, but I'm saying some because it's true based on my lived experiences in this position so far. Some of us may not be aware of the array of policies that exist. And it's not a deficit. It's just what is, because we're human beings and usually things are added to without being taken away. And so we end up with so much. But the question is, how are we doing with what we have? And how are we doing with what we have? That question is huge because some of us don't know what we have. And so this is why I brought up 220, because this is an opportunity that I think would be missed if I didn't bring it up. I think that when it was enacted, none of us were where we are now because it was enacted in 1999. But I think that during that time, the language probably was appropriate for that time. Even when it was amended twice thereafter, the language, may have changed slightly. It was refined a little, but today, especially the lessons from the pandemic and the Surgeon General recommending, increase mental health services, which include social, emotional, and academic learning. All of those things are huge when it comes to the impact on the landscape of education in Delaware. And so we have to reevaluate and sometimes interrogate what is currently there before we assume that it is useless to the cause that brought us here. And I think that 220 has 8 indicators that we can support with refinement. And that was the intention of the department for this year. The work group was formed last year, but in the spring, the intention was to bring in stakeholders so that we would have the voices at the table, but we didn't want to do that until we understood, what we had. Versus bringing someone to the table and we're not exactly fully and thoroughly prepared to, share or debrief the information. So it's a learning process for us as well. When changes in administration happen, it's almost as if you're starting over. And unfortunately, our children don't have the time to wait for us to get it together. But that's also why I'm advocating for leveraging that particular law. I think it would be us working smarter versus harder. And then once we understand diagnostically, what this would mean, then we can complement it in every way, shape, and form. I hope that answers your question, Gloria. And I hope that provides a little more clarity as to, maybe some of the questions we can ask regarding the barriers to implementation, because the speed limit is the law. And if you don't implement or drive at a certain speed limit on the road, you will get pulled over. And there's a series of things that are imposed as consequences if you do that. And so we have to ask ourselves with that piece, how are we going to monitor and implement, provide supports, technical assistance, and all of the above? My apologies, Representative Ray.
I thought I was on mute because I'm like writing and taking notes. So I apologize to you. I wasn't cutting you off. So I want to just try to framework a lot of what you just said. We need more accountability on what's already established. It seems like, Caitlin, can you email out the regulation that Monique sent us to the subcommittee? And if everyone could take a moment to check your emails to look over that regulation. I think there's opportunity to work within that. I think this is what you're saying. Please let me know, because I don't like thinking for people, but I just want to try to shape it out for everyone else in the subcommittee, that there is opportunity to work within this regulation and all the work topics that we have, and to incorporate that and make that the actual legislation. Yes?
That's the part of it. I just think this is a great foundation for us to build upon. But what it will look like, I don't have an end, but it's based
No problem.
agnostic of what we find within the work group and other variables as you present. Yes.
All right. Caitlin, can you let us know when that email has been sent out?
I just sent it out to everybody. So it should be hitting your inboxes soon. Would you also like me to forward the link that the Deputy Secretary sent out regarding social emotional learning?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will do that as well. One moment.
I also want to just address that the work that comes out of this committee, even the recommendations, whether we vote on them or not, we are still going to work on these because, again, we are on the front lines of these issues, which is, like I said, the individuals that sit on this subcommittee, it was important for me to actually pull people who see these issues in education every single day, whether it's on the front lines or on the policy end, trying to make sure that the front lines have the support that's needed. We know that there is a gap, that there is missing pieces to this problem that we are seeing, and it needs to be addressed moving forward. Now, how that needs to be addressed is what our work is. So I don't want anyone to think that, oh, I did all this work and research for nothing. No, we're going to work on it at the back end, even when the subcommittee is over. The work it will still be in progress. Whether it's this upcoming General Assembly or in 2 more General Assemblies, it's going to be worked on. And as we have learned, some things just take a little longer to implement because of the amount of input that we may need, more people at the table to develop and make sure that we are doing what is necessary and not just coming up with something off the top of our head because something needs to be done, because that's how we got here in education in the first place. Amanda.
So I'm reading the document that was sent over. I feel like I see things here that address like the second bullet, which was socioeconomic status. I'm just wondering, are these intended to be like SEL recommendations? Because I feel like it's not so much SEL, like diversity, absolutely, but like social emotional learning, I'm not quite capturing that with this. Some pieces of it, yes, but like, are we just saying this is part of it and then we need to kind of add some more?
So we can add to it. The recommendation can be to add this. This is what it currently reads as on regulation, was it 220? On update the language and regulation to state exactly this. So we can do that to address your second bullet point. So if you want to type up something real quick and shoot it to Amanda, not Amanda, you are Amanda, and shoot it to Caitlin, that, you see and you identify that this is currently what we had, this is how we can add social emotional learning to it. That could be a recommendation. Did I answer your question before I move on to a next person? Where'd she go?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I was putting my thumb up.
All right. My screen keeps flipping. I'm sorry. All right, Jamie, I see your hand.
Hello. So I'm just wondering, so I kind of piggybacking off of what Amanda just said, but is it easier for us to amend a current piece of legislation? Is it easier for us to get that passed or get that through? Because even though it doesn't have specifically SEL on here, I know that the prison to school pipeline that we have not addressed yet could definitely identify some of these issues, or we could add some of those issues that we're going to discuss in that presentation to this, and it could make it easier push or an easier sell since it's something that already exists.
So I think that Monique just put something out there and we can discuss it real quick as a subcommittee. We can use this regulation as a foundation, as Monique stated, to build off of as it relates to our working groups. So every recommendation can be built into this regulation. So this is what school districts suggestively should be doing. That does not mean that they are doing it. So the ultimate goal here is to take this recommendation and I'm going to turn it into legislation. And this is what you have to do because this is Delaware's law now, if that makes sense. Monique, is that kind of
Yeah, I wanted to respond to Amanda's question regarding SEL. I started teaching in the 90s and the language was different. And so if you have legislation enacted in 1999 that doesn't specifically or explicitly state SEL, by design, the regulation is supposed to be reviewed and amended, I guess, on a cycle, usually like 2 to 5 years or so. And so it was amended in 2004, amended in 2009, which is 5 years, but not since. If it was amended in 5 years following the 2009, I'm sure the language would have reflected social emotional learning. And then when we think about the research nationally and all of the issues that students are dealing with regarding toxic environments presented to them, along with the racial threat responses, when we think about how the body physiologically responds to that, and basically learning is unavailable for a certain amount of time because the amygdala is in fight or flight. All of those things play into the research evidence and data that we would use to substantiate the refined language in the regulation. So social emotional learning or social emotional and academic learning would absolutely be a part of that. Terry Lawler and I have had the conversation over the past year of how the entire scope of work, especially with Delaware being a trauma-informed state, we also have restorative justice or restorative practices. And there's a lot of language that we have to language set regarding the regulation, and the language, it all has meaning. So that's a very valid point. I just wanted to say that that particular regulation was for that time. If we choose to build on it and update it, it will most certainly include the relevant aspects of today's culture and the research evidence and data that we have. Thank you.
Dr. Rosser?
Just to reinforce what Monique was saying, I think there is an opportunity to just refresh, more than refresh, bring asset language even into this. When we read the regulation, there's an opportunity actually, these regulations should be reviewed every so often anyway. This is long overdue. And Monique, you're spot on. I see the opportunity to elevate this. There's actually power in actually putting attention on 220, and for folks to see that something that we were talking about in 1999 has made no momentum. There's actually, I think, a lot of power in not no momentum, but has, to think that we have task force that's talking about things that are in that reg that we're still struggling to see happen in our systems. There's a lot of power rather than just letting that reg just sit dusty in the back corner to actually put the spotlight on. It actually, just looking at it in 10 seconds makes the why very apparent for us. So not only would it be more efficient, I think it's an opportunity to make sure that we don't have something that has that kind of language in it. There's language in there, I think, actually, that should be cleaned up just because it's not representative of the language that we would use now, in 2021 to describe our children. So regardless, that needs to be touched up. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do it with the things we're talking about here. So I think, Monique, you're spot on with that.
Gloria?
Only just to kind of reiterate what these guys have all said already. I think to use this as a foundation because it's already there, and to take components of what we're talking about and build upon this. So for example, somebody said it before about the holistic piece. And even when we talked about those connection, the family connection, right? Then get parent engagement, the cultural responsiveness, that whole connection building with restorative, like all that added in, like to, again, just to build upon this as a foundation and then add those other very critical pieces would be great.
Jermaine?
Yes, thank you. So I think that we need to be more concrete than with what we were saying, right? When we start to look at the recommendations that are on here, and if you can scroll up a little bit just to go to the top, we're not concrete enough. We're not saying explicitly what that looks like, right? So I'm sorry, can you scroll up? Because I don't remember what it says word for word verbatim, but to make social emotional learning a priority in school districts and states is too vague. What does that look like, right? And for all of these, I just think we need to be clear, because it shouldn't be something where a person reads it and then their perception of it or their interpretation of it can vary, right? We want to make SEL a priority in school districts by blank, blank, and blank. What are we doing? So
So to that point, that is what the work we should be doing tonight, is making it very clear.
Right.
But now we have, like I said, due to Monique just provided us with another perspective to consider here. And it sounds like most of us are considering, and we can make a vote. Caitlin, do we have a quorum?
We do not. We are still one person short.
Okay.
All
Since
right,
there are-
Representative, I'm sorry.
well, it's
Go
just-
ahead.
Caitlin, were you going to say something else? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just like counting. So we have 14 people in the room, but 3 of them are DTI, me, and Emmy, and we don't count. So that gives us 11 people, and we need at least 12 to vote on anything.
Okay, and so what I was going to say, thank you, Caitlin. What I was going to say was, we have the recommendations. We also have the regulation. And so how do we, one, make sure, and this is what all of you have already said, how do we make sure that, one, we ensure the new vocabulary, the idea behind SEL is in what is already there in 220, but make 220 even more concrete, even more clear, right? When I look at 2.1, infuse information on diverse cultural groups throughout K-12. What kind of information? We talked about asset-based and asset approach, right? So let's be as more clear. Let's be more concrete again, so there is no gray area.
Monique, your hands up.
Oh, if it is, it's an error. My apologies. I may have put it up just to say thank you to Dr. Rouser, but that was it.
Okay, Gloria.
I'm sorry, I left mine up too. My apologies.
Okay. Amanda.
I was just gonna ask, could we possibly put this on a Google Doc and people can drop information and stuff? Honestly, I'm more visual, so I heard a lot and I probably processed about 70–75% of it. So maybe we could, I know my brain will work a little better if I could lay eyes on all this information that's been added. And then if everybody can see it and add edits, maybe the recommendations will start to get created. But right now, I feel like we learned a lot and we kind of need to process a bit so we can put something concrete down.
Okay, Caitlin, can you copy and paste regulation 220 on a Google Doc and share it with the members of the subcommittee? And go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, I meant these current recommendations and like everything just kind of all together, one stop where we can see everything we have.
So what's on the screen then?
Yeah, like what's on the screen, and then like somebody could attach the 220 to it. So basically the things that we have, it sounds like somewhere people are working on things. So maybe if under these different recommendations, bullet points can be added to say what's currently happening, it can help us streamline the recommendations. but I'm just struggling to see what fits where. I know we have the 220. I think somebody else mentioned another committee, but I just kind of need to like read it, if that makes sense.
We will make sure everyone have the document. So Kate was probably going, okay, before I make that statement, I got you, Amanda. Okay. Okay. Dr. Rouser, Shelley.
Yes, just two quick things. One is I'm thinking it could be helpful because we are kind of landing on looking at Reg 220, that we may have a document that actually has the bullets of 220, because 220 is pretty specific. I mean, broad, but there's very clear statements there. What we may want to do is just have a document that has those items, those numbered items of what's expected. And then if we start to align the things that we're paying attention here with those, I think if we all just get in there, cut, paste, and put some notes, then because our job won't be to actually change Reg 220, it'll be to recommend that it's elevated, and it happens sooner than later since it's like 12 years overdue or something. So we would, if we had those things lined up, then that would make us ready to give recommendations to the those who are actually revising Reg 220 to say, this is what this committee has noted as important. Members of this committee may even be a part of that work. The other thing I was going to say is just that when it comes to this language with regulations, typically from my experience with writing in a reg, is there's a balance between specificity and keeping things broad enough for a couple of reasons. One, so that the regulation can be relevant with time and new information. And then secondly, so that it can be broad enough that it is applicable to different contexts and where different systems may be in their implementation. So we don't want to be so specific that we're like talking about PD on this when a system may have been investing in that for the past 5 years and could be the ones that could model that for the state. And I don't know who those entities are, but I'm saying that sometimes we just make that regulation specific enough, striking the balance between being specific, but also being broad enough for differentiation between systems.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We now have a quorum,
Okay.
so don't anybody leave.
No. Yes. Shelley, thank you. Because that is as we're talking, and my brain is starting to comb through of how we move forward with this. I am open to suggestions. I will be the first one to say, when this whole subcommittee came up, and this has definitely has gone into a different direction than I initially had thought it would. And it's a good thing because we're having great conversations. We are talking about things that should be talking about in the right context. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just know that at the end of the day, there are enhancements that are needed. There are gaps that needs to be filled, and we have suggestions on how to fill them. So this document, our recommendations, it will be compiled in a report for under the African American Task Force. And there in this document under the African American Task Force will be a section on education. And here in the Education Subcommittee, this is what we have see fit that needs to change in education policy as it relates to African American children. And this is where our work will be outlined in cut. So the recommendation from us could literally be, we have used Regulation 220 as a foundation. And with this, it is our recommendation that Section 2.1 of this regulation be updated to this language. That could actually be the recommendation of our task force. Everything that each work group has done so far can be integrated into that regulation, and that can be our subcommittee's recommendation. Does that make sense? Yes? No? I used a lot of words. and it's been a long day. And some of us are just trying to get to Christmas break. I understand. Did I lose anybody here? I just want to make sure I have everybody with me.
Makes sense.
Okay. So now that we have a quorum, we are going to take a vote that we will use Regulation 220 as a foundation to integrate our work group topics into this regulation. And Caitlin, help me out with some words, because
Okay, let me type up what you're saying.
so
I'm
everyone
still
can see it
sharing
in
my
words.
screen, right? Okay, so, all right, start slowly, please.
And Monique, since you, all right, so I just want to make sure it's clear. I guess we want to make a motion to use Regulation 220 as a foundation. Someone else can help me with some words too. It's just not me by myself.
And also question, who is using Regulation 220?
Currently,
I mean, like, we're saying somebody needs to use it as a foundation. Who is the?
we, the subcommittee,
Okay.
the subcommittee. So yes, so every recommendation going forward will be integrated into Regulation 220 as a Regulation 220 will be the foundation, and our job is through these subtopics.
Do we say want to build upon Regulation 220?
Thank you.
Build upon Regulation 220.
With our
I'm thinking the Education Subcommittee will use Regulation 220 as the foundation to establish new regulation or to establish new criteria, something along those lines.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Here we
maybe
go. Collaboration.
something around updating language and because the big piece of it is that it needs to be enhanced and it also needs to be updated. So I'm just.
I agree. I like what's there, but it just needs to be updated.
Even we'll leverage, 220 might be good because that's really what
We'll leverage the revision of 220 in
There you
order
go.
to incorporate the
most current best practices or something like that related to,
the
working with
following. Boom, 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 boom.
Mhm.
You
I'm
know.
sorry, are we putting leverage instead of will use? Is that where it's
Yes.
going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
We'll
the
leverage
education,
the revision of Regulation 220
in order to,
Mhm.
in order to,
I kind of think that something regarding everything that you were all saying, but relevance has to be included because it's really in order to meet the needs of students or in order to meet the needs of somebody based on the relevance of today. I mean, we've had a pandemic and so many racial injustices that were everywhere on social media. So it has to be relevant somewhere. Relevance has to be a part of it.
How about something about in order to incorporate, I'm trying to come up with the words as we go, but incorporate, and then that would go into linked, or that's where the relevance would come in. Monique, that's what I'm trying to think of, to incorporate.
Like an equity-centered, culturally responsive lens or approach.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to put that in there.
But so this is just to make a motion
Mhm.
tonight. So let me be
All right.
very clear what's about to happen, okay? We are going to go back in with our work groups and figure out, based upon our work group topic, how we can enhance, improve, incorporate, provide criteria and recommendations within Reg 220 on our topic. And then everybody's going to give recommendations based upon that. That is what we just want to make a motion that we are now going to use Regulation 220 as a foundation. And this is what we're going to do. So it's not erasing any work that anyone has done. It's just taking what you all have come up with and how do we integrate that into this regulation to do all these fancy things that we are saying, to do all these action words. Is that clear? So let's make a motion. So the motion is to use Regulation 220 as a foundational provision. Is provision the word? Provisional document to work on diversity, school to prison pipeline, SEL. What was the other ones? I'm having cultural responsive teacher standards.
Mhm.
And I'm missing one more because I thought it was 5. Is it 4?
There are 4.
There's 4. Okay, thank you.
Right.
So that is the
The
motion.
diverse educators. Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you need a second?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we got about 10 minutes left and I don't want to lose anybody and we still got to make a motion on the minutes.
Okay.
So one, I want to make sure everybody's clear on what's happening. Thumbs up real quick. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right. All right. We all on board. Okay. Can I have a second on the motion?
You have a second.
Second motion.
All right. Caitlin, roll call.
Okay. I'm just going to go down my list as you appear in Zoom. Representative Moore,
Yes.
Christine Aloysius,
Yes.
Jamie Bailey.
Yes.
Okay, Shelley Rouser,
Yes.
Charito Calvachi Mateco,
Yes.
Amanda Holman.
Yes.
Okay, Jermaine Solomon,
Yes.
Gloria Ho,
Yes.
Representative Wilson Anton.
Yes.
Monique Martin.
Yes.
Okay. Stephanie Ingram.
I vote to abstain, please.
Okay. So one abstaining and Dr. Tasia McCove.
Yes.
Okay. Did I miss anybody? Okay, great. So we have 11 voting yes and 1 abstaining. The motion carries.
Jamie, your hand is up.
Yes, I was just wondering, so our next meeting is January 20th. Do you want our subcommittee groups to have our write-up to you by then? Because I know you have to present in January, so that's when it's due. Okay.
Yes. Caitlin, is our subcommittee before the general task force meeting?
Yes. So, but we also had
To meet.
planned to have our guest presenters on January 20th. So Sharif El-Mekki and Dr. Taryn Fletcher, they were going to come in and talk about teacher diversity. So we're keeping that as the agenda item for January 20th.
So can there be an understanding that January 20th may go beyond 8:30 a little bit, just so we can get everything we need to get done for the general meeting, African American Task Force meeting?
I mean, I could just update the DTI request so that it's a 2-hour meeting.
Is everybody okay with that? Make sure you have snacks and water. Dessert. Do I need to Grubhub everyone? Okay. All right.
So, and is the intention that we are doing work in the Google Doc in between so that what we do in January is going to be just discussion on what we see there and maybe cleaned up, and then we're just talking about that, not, trying to actually have a working session.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will send that Google Doc to everybody tomorrow. I started copying and pasting the information, but I've got to pull all of your Gmails into one Google Doc. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow.
Okay. And have everyone gotten a chance to read over the minutes from the last meeting? Did everybody? Any questions? Any revisions? Any? Okay. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes from December 2nd?
Motion to accept the minutes.
Can I
Second.
have- Thank you. All right. Roll call.
Okay. Representative Moore.
Yes.
I'm going to go down the list that's on the screen. Representative Wilson Anton,
Yes.
Christine, Christine, are you there? You're
Helps
muted.
if I wasn't muted. So I was not at the last meeting, so I don't know if I should,
Oh, okay.
I wasn't here, so I can't say whether the meetings were accurate, the minutes were accurate or not.
So is it cool if I just put you as abstaining?
Abstain, please. Thank you, Stephanie.
Okay, let's see. Gloria Ho,
Yes.
Amanda Holman,
Yes.
Jamie Bailey,
Yes.
okay, Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Jermaine Solomon,
Yes.
Dr. Rouser,
Yes.
Monique Martin,
Yes.
Dr. Tasia McCove,
Yes.
yes, and Charito Kawachi Mateko.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so we have 11 members voting yes, 1 abstaining, so the minutes are approved.
All right. Any last question, comments, or concerns? Oh, we need public comment. All right, we will take the last 5 minutes to yield public comment.
Well, we don't have any members of the public in the Zoom room, but for anybody who is watching on the live stream, you can certainly email your comments to African American Task Force at delaware.gov.
Right. Now to the subcommittee members. Any last questions, comments, or concerns? Nope. We are all feeling a little bit better now that we have a more direct plan moving forward with recommendations and building off the foundation of Regulation 220. Yes? All right. I want to wish you all season greetings and a happy new year. Please make sure you take some much needed self-care because education is a beast and we are just chipping away one day at a time. Okay. What do they say? How do you eat an elephant? one bite at a time. I said the whole thing and got the whole answer wrong. But that just tell you about my ambition. Just overtake it. All right. So with that being said, I wish you all well. Season's greetings, peace, love, and happiness to you and your family. Please make sure you self-care because it has been a long year. And with this new variant, please be safe.
Yeah.
All right. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I wish everyone well and have a good, motion to adjourn. Here we go. I heard it first and second in my ears. Have a good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night. Have a good